Breaking news, Donald Trump today says he is not opposed at all to putting U.S. troops on the ground, boots on the ground in Venezuela as part of a military operation there. Trump said in the White House today that we have to take care of Venezuela, whatever that means. This comes at the same time as Trump's Pentagon chief, Pete Hegseth, has renamed the Department of Defense to the Department of War. He says the U.S. is shifting away from a defense posture to a wartime activation posture, and he just launched Operation Southern Spear so they could conduct military operations in Venezuela without explicitly calling it a war. We're going to go to war with Venezuela shortly, but they're not going to label it a war. That would require Congress to vote on it. This is going to be very similar to the ways the United States has bombed so many Middle Eastern countries, except this time it's going to be in Latin America. If the mainstream media won't talk about this war, I will, so follow along, help me share the truth about what's happening in Venezuela and around the world.
The bill to release the Epstein files sailed through the House of Representatives. The vote was 427 to 1. Then they sent it to the Senate, and they thought there might be some problems there. But nope, not this time around. Chuck Schumer announced that they passed it with unanimous consent. Well, that was quick. So what's next? Next, it goes to the president, and he has to sign off on it. Now, in normal circumstances, a president might have the option to veto it, but these were passed so overwhelmingly, he won't really have the option to veto it. So then what happens? Well, it goes to the DOJ, and the DOJ could do a few things. First of all, they could do all they can to delay it and say they're going to only send out pieces at a time or whatever. They could do that. Or they could bring up the fact that Donald Trump wants them to investigate Bill Clinton, some other Democrats, and since there's an ongoing investigation, we can't release it yet. But that's going to cause a problem. That's going to look bad to the general public and to the politicians that voted to release the files. So they're going to get a lot of pressure. The last thing they could do is release the files, like I say, maybe in bits and pieces, but heavily redacted, really heavily redacted. We've already heard that people have scrubbed those files and certainly gotten Donald Trump out of the files, but that's not going to look real good. Remember what I've always said, Republicans, Donald Trump, always fuck up. They always fuck up. And if they release something like that, they're going to miss some things, certainly. And you don't need too much to take Donald Trump down at this point with all the emails. Secondly, they're going to get a lot of heat and a lot of pushback because they're still trying to hide this. But if nothing else works, if they try to hide the files or they try to scrub the files, here's one thing I know for sure that's going to happen because he announced it today. Representative Massey, the Republican that started this whole Epstein files release thing, he said if there's dicking around and they don't release the files, he's going to go onto the House floor, get all the names of the men involved in this from the victims, and he's going to read those names on the House floor. Now you might ask, why is he going to do it on the House floor? Well, here's the deal. There's a law that says, or a rule that says, anything that's said on the House floor, you can't be sued for. So he can stand up and say all the names he wants to say, and nobody can do fuck all to him. So one way or another, we are going to find out a lot about what's going on. We've already know a lot, and I expect more information coming out of the Epstein estate too. So it may not happen as quickly as you want, but we're on the right track, and it's going to end up soon.
I think they're ready to impeach, convict, and remove Donald Trump right now. My name is Austin. I'm a political commentator here on TikTok. And if you also don't enjoy what's happening in this country, drop a follow. Let's keep talking about it. Now, I want to be clear on a couple things. Impeachment is a toxic term when you're referring to that process with Donald Trump, because he has now been impeached twice already and never convicted in his first term. Secondarily, I'm just a guy. I am a political commentator. I happen to have a following here on TikTok, but I am not an insider. I don't have any sources. I'm just reading tea leaves. And when I started reading tea leaves last week, I told you guys that there was movement and momentum towards not just passage of this through the House and the Senate, but that it was probably moving towards at least a veto-proof majority. And today we found out it was essentially unanimous, with only one member of the House voting against it, and the Senate actually using the unanimous consent process, a little-known process where essentially they can say, we don't even have to look at this thing. We will pass it as is if the House passes it. And that's exactly what they did, which means all 100 senators had to say, yes, it will pass if it gets to us, no questions asked. So now it's sitting on Donald Trump's desk. And the dare that I think Congress has just put in front of him is that they believe that he will try to cover it up, or he will not release everything that they have immediately. And that is where I believe they are ready to impeach and convict. When was the last time that our Congress almost unilaterally agreed on any issue? In the age of political division, in the deep divide that exists between MAGA and the rest of the world today, it's almost unfathomable that you could get all of these people to agree on a certain thing, especially when it comes to potentially burying the President of the United States in his own gunk. But that's what they did. This is a message. And they are sending a loud and clear message that not only do we expect you to release the files post-haste, we expect them to not be tampered with. We expect them to be, not altered by Pam Bondi. We expect there to not be a never-ending investigation. This is such an overwhelming message for those of us that watch the political world, even in normal times, that I can't remember in my lifetime such a forceful statement from Congress on such a politically divisive issue. And so, the reason I believe they're ready to impeach and convict today, if necessary, is they're calling his bluff. They're saying, sign the bill, release the files. If you are innocent, you will be proven so by the release of those files. But if you try to mess with them, if you try to open investigations to stall this forever, we're just going to impeach you. We're going to remove you from office. Either way, the outcome will be the same. But Congress has had enough. They are done with MAGA, they are done with Trump, and they are ready to move forward past whatever the hell this last decade has been. Keep watching this. The vote today was important. The unanimity was important. I cannot emphasize enough. This is a monumental shift in the political happenings of this country.
I've been looking for this information all day. If you're an OG in the total hypocrisy community, you know that I often preach about not paying attention to the right hand all the time. That's the distraction. We had two major distractions today. The House of Representatives voting to release the Epstein files, and then also we had the Saudi prince visiting the White House, which was atrocious in and of itself. Here's what was going on with the left hand. Yes, the Trump administration is starting their plan to completely dismantle the Department of Education. No, I'm not talking about downsizing. I'm not talking about firing people. I'm not talking about minimizing funding. I'm talking about dismantling the Department of Education without congressional approval. Here's how it works. Forgive me for reading a little bit. I have some notes because this is quite literally breaking news right now. So the Trump administration launched a major restructuring initiative to transfer offices from the Department of Education to other agencies and departments. This move will take 6 offices of the Department of Education and place them in 4 other departments. Here's the breakdown, and I am actually shaking as a former educator. We will have the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education, as well as the Office of Post-Secondary Education, move to the U.S. Department of Labor. That means the U.S. Department of Labor will be in charge of K-12 and higher education programs. Next, we have the Office of Indian Education. That will move to the U.S. Department of the Interior, meaning the U.S. Department of Interior is now in charge of tribal education functions. This one I'm super concerned about, having been a teacher in a highly ESOL population, or English as a second language. We have foreign language programs within the education department going to the U.S. Department of State. Marco Rubio, for some reason, and his department need to oversee international/foreign language programs. Okay. And then last but not least, and maybe most scary of all, childcare access and medical education programs move to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Yeah, the guy with the brainworm will be overseeing early childcare and medical education programs. Not good. I would like to take a moment to recognize that in the mustache man's reign, there was something called the final solution, and it referred to the Jews and the showers and all of that. And they are using the language final mission. It says this restructuring is part of the Trump administration's, quote, final mission to send more education control back to the states and localities, reduce federal bureaucracy, and shift the Department of Education's role. Hear me out. They're shifting all of these offices to different departments so that the Department of Education cannot carry out its duties. And ultimately, it is much easier to take, say, the U.S. Department of State and look at its budget and say, we just don't have enough anymore to support English as a second language services or anything else having to do with foreign language, for example. That's how this happens. They have never, and by they, I mean politicians in the United States, have never done anything like this before. I need a minute.
Uh-oh, more bad news for the orange criminal piece of shit. The Associated Press is out with a new poll, and it's not good for the buffoon. The most unpopular president at this point in his presidency in all of American history remains the most unpopular president at this point in his presidency in all of American history. Let's take a look at the poll. Now, it's not just his approval ratings, which I will get to in a second, but they also asked some key questions. The first is, what do you think of the country's direction? Are we going in the right direction or the wrong direction? Now, you can see the red line on top, way above the green line. Well, that's wrong direction. 69% of the people polled think the country is going in the wrong direction. 30% said that it's going in the right direction. Now, what the hell is wrong with those 30%? Well, they're fucking idiots. That's what's wrong with them. They're part of Trump's cult. Let's see here. The next question they asked is on the state of the economy. Now, the red line on top are people who say the state of the economy is poor. You'll notice that number is 61. The people who said the economy is good is 38. Now, for any Trump cultists in the audience, 61 is greater than 38, which means more people believe that the economy is poor than believe that the economy is doing well. Now, who makes up this 38% who think the economy is doing well? Well, just like in the numbers above, who thought that, what did they think? That the country was going in the right direction? Those people are largely morons. But it's also people who are just fucking liars, right? And there's a bunch of liars in the previous set of numbers as well. These are people who are going to say that the economy is good no matter what. They could be literally begging for food on the street, but because they have been supportive of Donald Trump all of these years, they will never admit that the economy is bad. So they're just going to say that it's good. These are the stupid people. These are the Trump cultists. These are the people whose own personal psychology is so totally wrapped up in defending Donald Trump that they will just say that everything is great. As long as he's president, everything is great. Doesn't matter. Their whole lives could be falling apart, and I'm sure many of them are. But because they have been defending this criminal piece of shit for so long, like every single day for like a decade, they are psychologically incapable of divorcing themselves from him. So when a pollster asks, what's the state of the economy? Well, Trump is president, so it must be good. Is the country going in the right direction or the wrong direction? Well, my cult leader is president, so it must be going in the right direction. Even if they think it's not, they will never admit that things are going badly. Now that leads us to the all-important presidential job approval rating. Let's take a look at that. 61% disapprove of the orange criminal buffoon. Only 37% approve of him. 37%. That is really, really bad. Now, a lot of you might be thinking, well, so what? It's not going to make any difference. He's still president. He's still destroying the country. Well, true enough. But here is why it's important. We have these No Kings protests coming up tomorrow. which, by the way, they are scared to death of, because they know that these approval numbers are correct. They know that this man is wildly unpopular. They're trying to project an image of strength, but they know it's bullshit. Okay, he is.
Now, Donald Trump has declared that the U.S. probably wants to start talking to Maduro. For a few months now, we've been seeing how the U.S. has been moving ships, all sort of weapons and firepower to the Caribbean, close to Venezuela. However, now he's saying that he is thinking about talking to Maduro. Here's what he says.
Designation of that cartel associated with Maduro, does that mean that the U.S. government can target Maduro's assets or infrastructure inside Venezuela?
It allows us to do that, but we haven't said we're going to do that. And we may be having some discussions with Maduro, and we'll see how that turns out. They would like to talk.
So all this time you have moved all these weapons close to Venezuela, right? You've been trying to make everybody believe that you're going to go in and you're going to bomb Venezuela. You talk about even bombing drug lords inside Venezuela with all of this noise, right? Now it's about talking. Usually it starts with talking, right? You first reach out to Maduro and you try to talk, or Maduro probably reach out to the U.S. and say they wanted to talk. But in the very beginning, right, the U.S. acted like, you know what, we don't want to hear anything. We're just going to go in and we're going to remove Maduro, and you didn't call him all sort of names, right? So you didn't move all of that, spending taxpayers' money, move all these weapons. It's like I said in my previous video, it doesn't look like the U.S. is going to do anything. I think they remember what happened between Iran and Israel. One thing that is for sure is that if the U.S. decide that they want to bomb Venezuela, American soldiers will die. We are long past the time when, people will watch the U.S. just bomb them, right? And they will try not to respond because they fear the wrath of the U.S. Those days are long gone. Iran clearly showed us that those days are over. We saw the devastation that they gave to Israel, and the U.S. was incapable of defending Israel. It was clearly the end of a bully technique that lasted for too long. Now, people are no longer scared. When the U.S. decides that they will go to Venezuela, we must understand one thing. There will be some casualty on the side of American soldiers. That's a fact. They are ready to respond. They have what it takes. They have drones. They have the Russians there. They have the Chinese. Everybody is ready to respond to the U.S. when they are ready. That's what's going on. So it comes to what I said before, that everything Donald Trump is doing, right, whether moving those, weapons and boats and ships, all that firepower that he's trying to move there is simply a show of force, right, is a way of trying to intimidate Maduro so that the population can turn against Maduro and say, look, we don't want the U.S. to come and bomb us. Let's just remove Maduro so that the U.S. won't come. That's what they're trying to do. On top of the fact that they're trying to bribe people inside Venezuela who can turn against Maduro, his bodyguards, generals, you name them, right? Anybody who can get to Maduro, they're trying to get at them. That way, they wouldn't have to bomb and having Venezuela respond. Because when Venezuela respond, like I said, there will be casualty on both sides. And that's the biggest fear. Because if that happened, it will be a long time since U.S. soldiers died on a conflict like this, specifically ones that is based on clear lies. It is not going well for Donald Trump right now. The economy is not doing well, right? People are now starting to complain. Even his base is saying, look, ever since Donald Trump came, right, we don't see prices go down. In fact, it's actually going up. Grocery prices are going up. The last time that he put sanctions on Russian oil, prices are now going up in the U.S., right? So instead of those sanctions to bite in Russia, it is biting in the U.S. first. And that is why Donald Trump even extended the transfer of one of the, I think it's Luke Oil, right? They extended their transfer, giving them enough time to stop doing business with the U.S. If they cut business right now from, Russian oil, gas price go up in the U.S. And then you have the fact that the U.S. is participating in this conflict in Ukraine. They're giving Ukraine all the intelligence about Russia, right? Whether it's the refinery, oil refinery that Ukraine is bombing, whether it is where troops are stationed, right? Different strategic areas that Ukraine need to bomb. It is the U.S. that is giving that information. And that information is affecting the Russian economy and, of course, causing casualties. So Russia is waiting for the opportunity to get back at the U.S. in places like Venezuela. For all of those Russian soldiers that have died because of U.S. intelligence, because of U.S. participation in Ukraine, Russia will be ready right there to sink one of those so-called ships, if not all of them, if the U.S. decide to start the conflict with Venezuela. That conflict, if it starts, it will be Venezuela giving everything it has, knowing very well that they will have nothing to lose, because once the U.S. start bombing them, the U.S. doesn't care. They will kill civilians, do whatever they have to do. And they know that very well, that once they start, they will have to give everything they have. The biggest loser here will be the U.S. because once the U.S. start losing troops, then the population turns against Donald Trump. He becomes the most unpopular president they've ever had. That is why I told you that they will not attack Venezuela. He sees that he put himself in a corner, right? But that's his strategy. His strategy is always to try to dramatize things, make it seem like, yeah, I'm coming very strong, just for him to back down. The technique here is so that when you see him coming strong, that you get scared and that you give in. But it doesn't work in Venezuela, right? It seems like because the Venezuelans are working with the Chinese and the Russians, they understand what Donald Trump is doing. And both the Chinese and the Russians are telling them, stay still. Don't worry about it. All of that is noise. They're not going to attack. If they were going to attack, they wouldn't be waiting this long. They would not be sending this much firepower and giving you the opportunity to prepare yourself. Don't be surprised that in the next few days that you hear Donald Trump say, well, we put fear in Maduro and now Maduro wants to negotiate. So we are going to give him an opportunity. He said that he will no longer support drug lords into the United States. Donald Trump always has a way to try to get out of this situation. He did the same thing with the Houthis. Well, he told us that the Houthis came to him and started begging the please, we don't want any more and all of that. But we know the truth. The Houthis never begged. At the end of the day, they're probably going to make a deal with Maduro, get in there and try to get Maduro to sell more oil to the United States so that they can at least look like they have some leverage on Russia, because it is biting in the U.S. right now. The oil prices is going up. Gas prices at the pump for American citizens is going up, right? American citizens are not seeing the promise that Donald Trump made. So for him to decide to start another conflict now is a bluff.